Good evening, Zimbabwe and the world watching. Welcome to Make Your Mark with SOTZIM. So you see me starting off today's show with the biggest smile on my face because I am immensely proud to have an incredible panel of young people today. We are keen to hear their voices. We're keen to understand their experiences with COVID-19. And of course, with our children scattered all over the world, what else but a platform such as this to draw them in and get their views? On tonight's show, we've got Iwani Mawocha, Tinashe Mutasa, Diana Mandeo, Farai Fundira, Barbara Mutedzi, and of course, Nigel Chanakira. So Nigel and I are pretending to be you today. Bear with us if we get the wrong lingo and we make references that are completely inappropriate and aged. But we are really just kind of trying to get to the bottom of what life is like for you guys. So welcome everybody to Make Your Mark. All right, we are going to have a really interesting discussion today. As you know, we kind of tend to be quite organic with this. We want your honest views. This is really us trying to just get to the bottom of what life is like for you at the moment. But before we get into all of this, let's get an update, please, from Nigel on what SOTZIM has been up to this week.
Excellent. I'm clean shaven today so that I can act like a teenager. I hope I've got the swag of a teenager, and I look forward to this meeting. I honestly, genuinely believe the future belongs to the youth. And so when the idea and notion came up that the young people are wanting to express themselves, I felt it was most welcome. And so today I'm largely a listener, wanting to know, how our youth are doing in various corners of the world. At SOTZIM, it's very, very encouraging. We are on the verge of opening, and we are just finalizing on an official opening date of our prototype project, which is St. Anne's Hospital. Then clearly we will move on to other projects within Harare. There are a couple of clinics that we will work on in terms of testing. And then I am for Bulawayo, where there are various initiatives on the go. We had quite a successful week in fundraising, over $20,000 coming from the diaspora, specifically targeted at Bulawayo. And that's fantastic news. In Zim, we recognized our biggest donor, our last single donor in Zimbabwe, CBZ Bank. They came through with a phenomenal $6 million. And we were just at State House doing the official bit, and they also gave an ambulance to the Minister of Health. So all good. And we expect more in terms of other donors. We are taking donations from local individuals, local corporates, Zimbabweans in the diaspora, and I'm looking at the youth, particularly those on this panel, that they're going to chip in as well. So I'm all ears now. That's enough from me. Let's get the young voices on. Thank you, Mucha.
Thank you very much, Nigel. Right, so you heard it first, young voices. I've got a question for you guys. What does the word young conjure up for you in terms of how grown-ups perceive you and the strength of your voice? That's to anybody who's willing to be the brave one and go first.
Okay.
So, ladies first.
Okay, fine, Terry. So when people say young, when it comes to us, I feel like it kind of means weak, I don't know. And it kind of means like, sit down, I'll tell you what you must do, and we have this covered for you. So that's kind of the negative part of how people view young. And then there's also there's the future for you. The young people are our future, and we believe that they are going to come up with the plans for the future. So there's a two-way to it.
Yeah, so just adding on to that, I think when people think young, they think fresh, they think change, they think the leaders of tomorrow. But in actual fact, it's like we need the young and the old to incorporate that future, because a system doesn't work with a certain part. Both parts need to be incorporated. So yeah, that's what I think of when I hear the word young.
And is that in a cultural context or just broadly?
So I would say broadly.
Any other views, opposed or otherwise?
I think that whilst I'm not going to get mad at being called young. I'll hang on to that as long as I can. But I think when we talk about young, a lot of the time we do talk about the future and not enough about now. I think that especially culturally, we all come from a culture in which respect for your elders is paramount. And I completely agree with that. But that also sometimes means that the opportunities that there are for us to really make change now with the knowledge that we already know and the new insight that we already have keeps getting kicked further down the road because it's for the future, and not for now. And so I think young is sort of a double-edged sword in that there's a lot of power to it. There's a lot that we can bring, a lot that we're constantly learning and absorbing, but the amount that we can implement that is sometimes not as much as we would like.
Tinashe?
You know, it's funny. I think when I hear the word young, I get kind of excited because I think it's the beginning of such a long journey. I think, especially when someone says, wow, you're so young, and they're like, well, you should keep on to that, hold on to that. And I said, but why? It's such an exciting, I think mentally you can be young in how you just act every day, you know, and just doing new things. Being young is also to do with kind of like a newness to doing something and to being somewhere, being young in a new country, being young in a new family, you know, in a new setting, you know, being a grandparent, that you're a young grandparent, you know, your first time grandparent. That's an amazing thing. So I think the word young for me constitutes the word new, and also ability to start. So really a beautiful way to do it. So yeah, that's what I get when I hear the word young. I'm excited to get a bit older, you know, like the, you know, hair, the beard. Oh yeah, that's me.
So majority and overwhelming view. Barbara, do you come in with any difference in perspective at all?
All the definitions that everyone brought in do make sense. So I'll start on one point. Young has been seen a lot in cultural context as you're for the future, but not for now. And unfortunately, life is happening now. It's not like once we turn 25 or 30, there's a bell that's going to ring and say, okay, now you're an adult. Now we can sort of bring you into the conversation. So you'll find even at policy-making spaces, young people are not brought into the conversation. So we make decisions on behalf of our young people without actually bringing them in. And the decisions that are made from the context of an older generation when they were young. But you know, the beautiful thing about being human beings is we're dynamic, we change. So we need to bring in all those conversations onto the fore. And then I do love what Tinashe says about, you know, young is fresh, it's new. So it's a thing that needs to be brought into conversations every single day, because when we bring in everyone in society into any conversation, whether it's at family level, national level, regional level, then we have all this mixture of ideas that are both new and old so that we can all move together intergenerationally.
Very good. So level setting then, when we think about the generation of old grown-ups, etc., there is typically a very traditional view of what youth should do. So you leave home, you go to university, and your career has probably been mapped out for you already. Some of you may be given the flexibility to decide on what that career looks like, but I think an overwhelming majority of African and Asian societies tend to have that perfect plan before you're born. You shall become a doctor, an accountant, a lawyer, etc. When I look at this panel, I'm completely overwhelmed with pride at how you guys have just gone on to do such diverse stuff. So looking at Iwani, for instance, you know, our resident hyper-polyglot, we're speaking in English today, by the way, so let's just make that clear, who is into acting. She's a Yale grad. She is a digital babe. She has just done incredible stuff, model, writing, the works. You've got this beautiful balance between the academics and the artistic and the tech and all the stuff that kind of makes the world go round. What was it about your upbringing that made you think big and think without limits and kind of just explore such sometimes diametrically opposed avenues?
About my upbringing, I think it was a combination of several things. My family did move around quite a lot, so I was exposed to a lot of the world, and I think I really began to flourish as a person when I was studying in Swaziland at an international school, where I was able to have a lot of interaction with people from so many different places and backgrounds and cultures, and we were pushed really hard, not just to excel in academics, but also to think about what impact we leave on the world, what sports we're doing, what creativity we're doing to make us a well-rounded person. And I think I never really let that go. And I sought that out in future experiences, which is why I came to Yale in Singapore. It felt like an extension of that. And then I also think it's in large part been my parents. I think they knew very early on that I was much more creative than mathematical, for lack of a better word. I mean, I was good at maths for a time, and then it went downhill. I don't really know what happened there. But they were always kind of trying to work with me when I was starting to, you know, move away from physics to the art. They were like, well, maybe you could be an architect. And then I went further away, and they're like, okay, well, maybe you can be a computer scientist. And I tried that, failed that. And they gave me that room to fail and encouraged me to, you know, get back up and find other ways that I could still incorporate aspects of that, which is how I got into the creative work. My final body of work for university was Afropolitan artwork. And I combined that with taking programming courses on my own with a professor from our university, independent study. And I don't think I would have had the confidence to do that if my parents hadn't been encouraging me the whole way through. And if I also hadn't been pushing back a little, I think that, especially for our generation, being able to push back and say, actually, there are opportunities in the creative field. There are things that I can do, like, let me show you, and have parents allow you to show them and allow you to flourish is really, really important. And I think that's kind of what helped me.
Ioane, you perhaps have a bit of an unfair advantage in that your name actually encourages you to speak out, right? Ioane means speak out. So it
Yes.
was preemptive of your parents, I guess, to name you that with a view your life would follow through. Over to Tinashe. With a dynamic personality. So you're the guy who's on the microphone, who's studying political science in New York, who's in California at the moment. You know, you've been able again to kind of bring that academia and mix it up with the arts. How has this kind of helped you navigate COVID-19 and that need to be diverse in your thinking and in your adaptation? Because in order to switch sides of your brain as you've done, means that you must have that adaptability inside of you.
I think the first thing my mom told me when I got to Sacramento, and the first time I called her, I was like, I can't do schoolwork. I can't. I don't know if I'm going to be able to do schoolwork. Yeah, the last time I did homework or schoolwork at home was in high school. And it's not clicking right now. And she said, Tinashe, adapt. Don't sit down and just cry about it. Adapt. Think about how you're going to move around it. Find a space where you can work. And I think taking in that whole idea of having that duality of art and also a bit of academia allowed me to really put in perspective how to do it and why I was doing it. It forced me to reflect. A lot of my process and a lot of what music and going through school has taught me how to reflect, self-reflection especially, and ways in which I can do that by myself, to kind of get into my headspace that, okay, this is where I need to go. This is where I'm going. And I think the music helped me do that a lot because it gave me a platform to just allow me to express myself freely and say things that I wouldn't normally say to you like this. My biggest dream, and I think the one goal, and I think probably defining factor of my music is I don't want it to be defined by me. I want it to be defined by the art. You know, I want the art to be the best part of it. And I think that allows me to separate the music from the artist.
Sure.
That makes sense. And
okay.
I think in being able to do that, I can kind of maneuver and adapt. So yeah.
So we've got this team 1 that is arty. Then we've got the team 2 with scientists. So I'm gonna turn over to you, Tari. You're studying civil engineering in Manchester. You are, in fact, I call you a scientist, but you've got an artistic flavor to you as well, because you do a lot of stuff with mentoring, with the spoken word, which means, again, you're kind of leveraging all parts of your brain. Talk me through what it was like leaving home, going to the UK, and just kind of needing to establish yourself and discover how you can position yourself as an independent figure first and foremost, and how that's then prepared you for chapter 2 of our conversation, which is COVID.
Well, so I was fortunate enough to play for the national team of Zimbabwe for golf. And so for the last 5 years before I left for university, I had been traveling to numerous countries, playing with other international students of high quality and a high caliber. And because of, I guess, that level of competition, it, similar to Tinashe, it just forced me to adapt. I think what was really helpful was back at home, how I was raised. I was always told that, whatever situation you're in, you're going to need to adapt. And I think when I came to university, that was really helpful, because I came into university in a position where I just saw people as people. I didn't necessarily see them as from different cultures, from, let's say, different races, gender, etc. I just saw them as people, and I just decided to engage them and love them like that. And that's the same way I produce my engineering work or my arts. I know people compartmentalize things and view things as maybe different, It's either you have a maths brain or an English brain. I believe in God, and I believe that he said that, things are good and things are his, and he loves them. And I think like music, music has a rhythm. I think there's a rhythm to people, there's a rhythm to conversation, there's a rhythm to math, there's a pattern to everything. And that's how I see the world. That's how I see my interactions with different people. So while maybe some people see it as me, being engineering Tari from Monday to Friday, and then, I don't know, spoken word Tari to on the weekend, it's actually just the same, but it's just, tuning the frequency and, tapping a different part of, I guess, who God's made me to be.
Wonderful. I love that idea of sort of the diversity of God means that you can tap into various aspects of your being and be excellent at it. Good on you for that. We want to hear now from Miss Diana. So we've got our doctor in the house, who is a final year med student at the UZ. She's been selected onto Crossroads Emerging Leader by Harvard University. She's got a fellowship from University of San Diego. So, Diana, you are our Chiremba on the panel. You are our scientist on the panel. Talk to us about what motivated you to go into medicine first and foremost. And then I do understand that you're kind of primed to be on the front lines or to be in the battle against COVID-19 as and when you can. Walk us through a bit of that, if you would.
Okay. Hi, Mucha. Okay. So the thing is, I never wanted to be a doctor. I told my parents that straightforward from grade 1. I was just like, guys, this is not happening, because my dad wanted a doctor child. And I'm a first child, so I guess pressure was on me. But I made sure everybody knew. So it was like that through high school, up until like the last semester of high school. I donated blood. Random blood donation, my first blood donation, and I felt like, wow, I saved a person. So then from that day I was just like, but also like, what's my reason for not doing medicine? But then I didn't tell anybody, and then I kept it for a while, researched about it, and when I eventually applied at the UZ, I told my parents that, hey guys, I'm doing medicine. And my dad was so happy. The man literally jumped, guys. Okay, and then proceeding to then Harvard University, Harvard Business School to be specific, and the University of San Diego. I think me applying for these things and getting them is sort of what Iwani had mentioned about your parents giving you room to fail. So usually when I apply for things, I tell my dad that, hey, I want to do this. I might fail. And then he'll say, oh no, you're going to be brilliant. And he gives me that room to fail. I just wanted to add that. And then being primed to work in the front lines. I feel like even when COVID started in China, every medical student was on edge, because, if these guys die, it's going to be on you, kind of. It's morbid, but it gets to that. But it's also a feeling of, I want to help, I want to be involved, because this is something that's in my profession. So it's personal when you hear that 10% of doctors in Italy are affected. So then it's like, that could be me. So it's kind of very sentimental. And that's why I've been involved in increasing awareness in communities like the deaf community, creating videos in sign language, and trying to make sure everybody just gets away and nobody gets that much infected, because it's so personal to me.
No, that's beautiful. And then over to you, Barbara. Sorry to leave you last. We've got quite a few opinions and views and perspectives to get into the mix. So Barbara Mutedzi is our neuroscientist. She kind of does neuroscience-based coaching. She's very much involved in health and community psychology. She's all about sociocultural medicine and anthropology. So she's kind of our mind person on the panel. Barbara, walk us through your choice of profession and how you've been able to work with youth and kind of help them to prepare for things like COVID-19.
So one of the things I love about this panel is everything that everyone is contributing is so important in terms of the communication we have with the people around us, especially the people who look after us. So I love how, when you have a family that allows you to fail, that's totally amazing. And it's a space where people know and can identify your skill, but they also allow you to walk that journey for yourself, holding your hand along the way. And so for me, when I started out, I've always been an inquisitive child. So I would be the last person in the library every single time. And it was because there was this inner thing inside me that drove me and always asked the question why. So whatever we do, when we ask the question why, it leads us down some sort of path. When you're sort of 2-year-old or 3-year-old, you're always asking, why, mama, why, daddy, why? But then when we become adults, we stop asking that question, because now society has panel beaten you into a certain space. But if you have a platform where people allow you to always ask that question, or at least provide you with spaces where you can go and look for those answers, it becomes easier. So for me, I've always been interested in why we do the things we do. And so I went into psychology through that questioning. And I always knew I wanted to help people. So I started from working as an ophthalmic assistant, which is someone who helps an eye doctor. Then I became a massage therapist because I wanted to help people. Then I thought I wanted to be a doctor, but I hated physics and chemistry. So it's continuously asking that question, why and where you want to go. And then also speaking to the people around you, as opposed to just asking the question by yourself, because then that brings the conversation together and other people can help you along the journey that you want to go. But what I do find is there's a disconnect between young people and older people, because older people will be saying, well, this is the path that has worked, so perhaps walk that path. And then the young people will no, but I want to walk this path. And we don't actually understand why we want to do that. We don't ask the question why. So in both conversations, when we say, well, this is what you should do, then we should say why. And if this person says, I want to do this, then we should also ask why. So that's how conversations sort of work and mesh each other moving forward. And for me, I started off as a life coach as well. But I used to just get my clients up to a certain stage. So I studied mindset coaching. I got my clients to a certain stage, they wouldn't go over. Then I went to study the mind and the brain and how we can use that for higher performance. So the trajectory of my coaching and my life story has always because I've been asking the question why, and that led me through a certain path that I then harnessed and keep moving forward with. So the question why is so important. And that someone was mentioning about not having a right and a left brain, but everything is meshed because God is in it. So there is a higher power within us. And as long as we use that as a foundation to everything, we are much bigger than we can ever think that we are. And so when you listen to your intuition, your gut instinct, that little thing inside you that pushes you down a certain path, I call those little breadcrumbs that your soul and your spirit is living along your life path until you get to where you need to be in your life.
Thank you very much, Barbara. Okay, so my next question requires a rapid response from everybody. I need a short phrase in response to my next question. Are you ready? When you think about COVID, what is the first and most deepest concern you have for young people?
The new normal.
Mm-hmm.
I think everyone's saying, oh, we're going to get back to normal. Things are going to go back to being how they were. But in actual fact, they're not going to go back to how they used to be. The same way earthquakes can happen, and certain facilities have areas where they have earthquake relief. There's certain change after having an earthquake, and things aren't never really the same. And this is a pandemic, which is one of the first of its kind in a long time. And I think because of that, we're going to have to adapt in the new normal.
Right. So Terry, you've just kind of killed the rest of my game by giving me your explanation this early, which is all good. I need you guys to just give me that quick response, just a really short phrase, and then we're going to go into the why afterwards. Yeah?
We have time.
Which I don't have a concern, but one word, rocket.
Rocket, that's interesting. Okay. Playing psychological games with us already by throwing in random words like rocket, but we'll come back to that.
My biggest concern is mental health.
Burnout.
Okay. So Terry, thank you very much for talking us through the new normal. And I think you're absolutely right to point out what does life look like after COVID-19. And many of the youth that I interact with have deep concerns about their employability. They've got deep concerns about the chasm that COVID is creating for them and this inability to catch up at the point life becomes normal. So that new normal argument is one that I'd like to explore with all of you separately. On the issue of we have time, I'm curious to understand what that means to you.
I think one thing that at least for me, that I have come across in a lot of my peers and a lot of the people I talk to that I'm close with and how we want to kind of take this time and how we're developing is realizing that we have so much time. Although that, life is not guaranteed and, we may not know what happened, we have so much time to allow ourselves to explore all these different options, but also to allow ourselves to work and to fail. We have time to fail. I'll use myself as an example. I love what I do and I love my music. And I I'm constantly inspired by other artists. And I think one of my greatest kind of realizations over the past few months is leaning into understanding your inspirations and getting to know your heroes and understanding what made them who they are, how they got to who they want to be, and realizing that some of my heroes only released their first album at 27 or 26, whereas others have released at 18, 16, and maybe have done well, maybe have not. But it's that idea of the ones that I have found that have had the most timeless careers are those that took or were able to realize that I have time. And for young people, especially right now, whatever you're doing, understanding that you have time. That doesn't mean wait. That means start now, but don't be upset that you're not getting to the goals you're getting to right now. Because if you do that, you're leading yourself to a very, very, very dark place that will only result in doubts and all that. Allow yourself to be on the journey and get there.
Okay. So I'm going to segment these responses, and I want to circle back to each and every one of you. Everyone's safe. Tari, who has given his view on this. Tari, I'm going to ask you about the concept of we have time, whether you agree with that or not, what that might look and feel like to you. But if I could start off with everybody else on Tari's sentiment around the new normal, what does that new normal conjure up in your minds? Go ahead,
I was just going to say that a lot of us who are not at home right now, we're probably not going to be able to see our families for a really long time. And I think we're only just starting to realize that. Like I'm in Singapore, for example, and you know, it's going to be a couple months before our borders open. And even then, like, are there flights that are going to be going back home and things like that? I think part of the new normal, for a while at least, is going to be learning to cope for a long period of time without seeing my family, without seeing our families. Yeah.
Sure. So separation from family is one.
Okay, so my concern with the new normal as a Zimbabwean, young Zimbabwean living in Zimbabwe, and I'm watching this news about how big economies like the US are going to face recession. And like we all know what the Zim economy is like. I guess the worry is what will recession and inflation look like after COVID, because of COVID, when we already have problems before the COVID-19, as well as concerns of young people learning in Zimbabwe. But so we've got new e-learning things coming in and everything, but data bundles are very expensive in Zimbabwe. So what is that going to mean to a kid whose parents are sacrificing a lot so that they get to learn at NAST or use it or wherever, and then now they don't even have enough money to then purchase the data or Wi-Fi bundles so that this child learns. So then I feel like it's going to create a greater gap in education systems. So that's a big concern as well.
For me, I don't like the term new normal because every day our cells are changing. Every day as human beings, and I'll keep saying this, we're dynamic human beings, will change, and we do change. Three things that are true in this world is death, taxes, and change. So the reason why I don't like new normal is it does bring in a certain fear because we are not so sure what the new normal is moving forward. What I do like about this time period is it allows us to actually stop and see what has worked in the past and move forward with that. And then also to sift away the things that haven't worked and find better ways of moving forward. So as youth or young people, there's an opportunity for people to step up and to actually have their voices heard and to leverage the knowledge that they already have and the platforms they have. I mean, if I can give an example, there's a gentleman called George Chingore, who's part of Kofema Zimbabwe, and he produced the first prototype ventilator after a few days, after watching a video online. And it's things like that that the young people, you know how Tinashe was talking about fresh and new in the beginning about youth. So there's an opportunity to actually step back and say, okay, how can I contribute to my life, to my family's life, and to the nation? And how can I do it knowing the challenges that we have in the country and globally? So it's a great platform and a space to be in to actually reflect and start carving out the path that we want to move toward as young people.
Thank you, Barbara. Finally, Tinashe.
I think I agree. I definitely agree with Ms. B. I think that's the understanding that saying the new normal, I feel like that constitutes that there's nothing, we can't take anything from before COVID, you know, that this has to be completely new. Where in fact, I think what COVID has done is really said, pause, stop, think, let's move forward. Not more so stop, destroy, start again. Stop, think, let's move forward. I think that's what COVID has been more so than to change, to kind of stop what's been happening. So yeah, I think that's why I've been with it.
Terry, do any of these responses resonate with your thought process?
So I'd like to challenge both Tinashe and Barbara, actually. So what I meant by new normal was the sense of, like, for example, I gave the example of a natural disaster or something which happens, which causes people to react because of that. And so new normal isn't saying that we're going to destroy something and start afresh. For example, in the Bible, new normal, repentance would be turning the other way, turning that direction. So just in the same way, I think certain directions will have to be changed. I think the way some people connect, because we are social beings, has to change. I think the way that we, deal with our own health, our mental health, our physical health, people have to turn the other direction and walk into a new path.
So I would like to also re-challenge you on that, coming from a mindset perspective. The words we use are very powerful. So when you say new normal, that triggers fear in a lot of people's minds. So I do understand what you mean totally, because we can't be the same as we were from before, right? We have an opportunity to step up. So the words we use have to be ones that are strengthening for us to move forward, because fear comes from not knowing. And what it does in our brains, it releases, a stress hormone called cortisol and other stress hormones. And unfortunately, that actually makes us take a step back, because now we don't know what's in the future. So we don't want a new normal. We want to be comfortable as human beings to the things that we already know, because we know how those function. So the explanation you gave, totally understand, and it does mean that we do need to find a different way of working around our systems, our processes, our relationships, our communication. I would change the term new normal and find another way that's more embracing and forward moving. Those two words for me don't work, because they do trigger fear, and fear, as we know it, is false evidence appearing real, as opposed to feeling excited and ready to actually move forward to where we want to go.
And I suppose for vulnerable youth or vulnerable people out there, the new normal for me means that this is what life is going to become. So if you start coining it during lockdown, if you start coining it during a period where you've got mass graves being, dug up in New York and people dying without family, that becomes the new normal. That would maybe trigger that fear factor. So could it be that you find a different expression? If you could find a different expression, Teddy, what would it be?
I guess thinking on the spot, maybe we're going back to abnormal. So just something.
Sure. Okay, abnormal it is then. I think it's abnormal for human beings to be cooped up in a house 24 hours a day, not be able to talk to each other and go out for a walk and so forth. So let's call it abnormal. You've got my vote on that one.
Yeah.
Terry, I'm sticking to you. The idea of we have time. Does that sit well with you?
So yeah, no, not necessarily. I think time is one of the only commodities we can't get back. If you, for example, sleep 8 hours, it's not like you can get those 8 hours back. With other things, you can get it back. But like Tinashe was saying, it's about the steps you are taking with the time you have. And I think touching on to some other points that were raised, as maybe, I don't want to generalize, but maybe as some young people, we have this hustle culture about us. And so sometimes people think, I need a hustle for my last name. I need to do X, Y, Z. People will know me. They know that, Emmanuel Fundira's son, or whatever you want to, I guess, gain a name for. But I think it's more about choosing and allocating your time wisely. For example, some people might come into the pandemic coming from a busy period, and what they actually need is rest. But that rest is building a platform for them to actually build onto their future, I guess, careers or relationships.
Any opposed views to that? Alternative, opposed, agree strongly?
Well, I think what Tinashe meant when he said that we've got time, it's not necessarily that we shouldn't have aspirations or that we shouldn't work towards our goals. But also I feel like things happen for people at different stages of their lives. I mean, the guy who started KFC was a very young old man when it eventually happened. So then sometimes you get pressured when you see people achieving these big things, that you forget that, you know what, you have to stay in your path, stay in your lane, work as hard as you can, but remember that you've got time to try over and over again. Because if you live like you don't have time, then you try that one thing, and then if you fail, it's like, oh my gosh, I wasted all my life on this one thing. But just that understanding that I've got time, it means I've got time to fail. And as young people, we really have to fail, and fail early, so that as we proceed, we make better decisions, and you can't learn without failing.
Okay, so there we have it. You can't learn without failure. Iwani, what's your take on this?
I think I would agree, especially because, you know, I am a fresh grad. It's been 2 years since I graduated university. And, you know, leaving school, everyone had that perception that it's like, okay, now we're starting things. Now, you know, is the time that we're supposed to be creating more than ever before and rising astronomically. And I think the further I go into adulthood, I realize that that's not true. Even the idea that you have to achieve success before the age of 30 is such an arbitrary number. And it's coming soon, you know? and so, yeah, I do like the idea of we have time because, you know, as someone mentioned before, like, we're constantly comparing ourselves to other people, more so now than ever in quarantine, where there's nothing to do but look at social media. And you have the people who are consuming and the people who are still flexing somehow in a quarantine, you know, and you can start to beat yourself up inside and think, well, I'm not where they are. I'm not, you know, but we do have time. And I need to remind myself that more so than anyone, I think.
So I'm going to make this an intergenerational discussion by pulling in Nigel. Nigel, what's your take on this? Do these young bucks have time?
Yeah, I think what they must realize without a shadow of doubt is time moves so quickly. It is only yesterday that I was young, you know, in terms of being youthful. So I think they've got to realize that, you know, time is not necessarily on their side. You know, life moves quite rapidly. The years just move on. And so, yes, there is time in the sense that COVID has meant we're locked in. We haven't been able to do as much as we ordinarily would be doing. But without any doubt in my mind, time will slip away very, very quickly. And if they could harness the time and use it for something constructive, I mean, it's that pause button that's been pressed in your life. So use it wisely. If you were thinking of investigating, experimenting with something, now is the time to actually explore. And, you know, so that when, in fact, you can seize the day, you go ahead and do so. I've been intrigued by the number of businesses that have started during this COVID period. And that's the challenge that I'm throwing out to the youngsters. I know somebody who started a magazine. I know somebody else who started a delivery pizza business, you know, during this very period. I started something, you know, interestingly. I learned how to thunderclap and advertise and mentor youth online. And I've had more online, you know, demands than ever before. So I'm charging out, except, of course, when it's SOTZIM. But all these are new businesses. And so this is an opportunity. Supply chains have been broken. Why not do something? I know teachers who are now teaching online. And this is something which you as students can do. Most of you are students here. And you got a coaching capacity. Let me tell you something. The parents are struggling teaching your brothers and sisters back home. We're not cut out to teach them. We're not cut out to do homeschooling, particularly in Zim. And so those are all opportunities that we can explore more than we ever could as students, because you're techno savvy. My generation are probably not most of the time. I was chatting with my aunt just the other day, and unfortunately, I've got a cousin who passed away. And so she was left with Tawanda to homeschool. Now, she doesn't have a clue how to do it. Now, those are all opportunities. And I was saying, well, you know, my Nini, don't bother. Find a young person who is smart enough to do this for you or to show you how. And these are all opportunities which I think we've got new businesses starting because you're a younger, more techno-savvy and, you know, more open-minded, more exposed than many of us are. So thank you.
So guys, you need to, I guess, always remember that it's not very long ago that we had to physically write letters and take them to post offices and wait a week before they could be delivered to the recipient. So in a time where technology means that you've got everyone at your fingertips, essentially, we need to be careful with this perception that there is a lot of time, because I completely agree that it moves very quickly. And then on the concept of time, the word rocket that was thrown out by Barbara, I want to know what you all think it means.
I thought that it more so meant probably talking about the space shuttle launch that got canceled yesterday, kind of talking about that, not necessarily that instance, but just the idea of, you know, us going and doing things during this COVID period that are not normal, and still going above and beyond to do them during a time like this, and that it's possible for us to still do these things. 9 years later after the last launch, now, with a whole rocket ship that's almost fully functional by the pilot in the, in the cockpit. So
sure.
So yeah, but I was also saying I wanted to say with the internet as well. I think it's good to know that as great as it is that we have it at our fingertips and communication at our fingertips, I think honestly the internet has made communication, it's dulled it down a little bit. And it's made it so complicated, and it's given it all these rules, where communication now becomes a game. I prefer not to play them just because I don't have time for them. But, you choose how long to respond, when to respond, what day, what platform should I do that on? Whereas with a letter, you just say what you want to say, You put it on paper, and it takes a couple weeks, and it's like, wow, this is what you did this month? That's amazing. Let me tell you what I did this month. Send it back. That's amazing. I prefer that. But yeah, that was my little side note on the internet.
Tinashe, have you ever written a letter to your parents from the US?
You know what? I love hearing my mother's voice.
There you go. Perfect answer. Okay, let's leave that.
If I wrote a letter, I wouldn't be able to hear my mother's voice, and I need that.
There we go. Okay, Tari, what's your take on the word rocket? Quick, concise, to the point for all of you, please.
Okay. Take off. I think this is the time where it's a perfect opportunity to act. For example, if anything, like I lead a community organization tackling mental health, and this is the time where everyone is actually thinking about mental health, which we will touch on a bit later. So I think it is about taking off.
Okay, taking off. What's your take on it, Diana?
For me, super speed. From Alice in the Wonderland, it says that we have to run as fast as you can to stay just in the same place, and as well as moonshot, because I guess a rocket is going to the moon. And moonshot ideas is basically the idea that you've got to come up with things that are bizarre and weird and sound like they're out of this world, but they actually work. So I'm taking part in the MIT COVID-19 challenge again this weekend. And they sort of encourage this kind of thinking in COVID times where you think of things that aren't necessarily in existence and trying to get them in existence in 48 hours. So those are the two things that come to my mind.
Nice. Okay, Wani, let's see how close to her fact you are.
When I think of rocket, I think of fuel. How much do you have and what is that fuel made out of? Because it's all very well propelling yourself into outer space, but do you have fuel to get further or to get back,
Very interesting. Brilliant. Barbara, tell us what rocket means, please. Take us out of our misery.
Everything that everyone said is right. It takes more fuel for a rocket to launch than it takes for it to circle around the Earth or planet. And the reason why this is so important is it might be difficult right now for all of us being in social isolation and distancing, and that's okay. Just know that you just need more mental strength for you to go toward the dreams and the journeys and the goals that you need to go to. We talked about, time as a resource. We need to ask ourselves, are we being resourceful with the current resources that we do have, whether it's time, whether it's money, whether it's relationships, whether it's communication? So always don't wait to get more resources. Look at what you do have as a resource and how are you using that? Are you using it in a way that's productive? Nigel talked about opportunities, and I love that because it brings in innovation, it brings in entrepreneurship, finding out where the challenges are and finding ways to handle those challenges or to help other people who are needing help. There's a term in neuroscience called neuroplasticity, and it just means that if I could take you back to a statement that says that you can't teach an old dog new tricks, you can. It just takes longer because our brains are literally plastic. So when you find that you're needing more strength, it's okay because your brain has been wired in a certain way, but you can change. So rocket means use more fuel to, from that launch pad to go to where you want to go. Be innovative. Look at the opportunities that are already there through a fresh new pair of eyes, and move forward to where you want to go. But just make sure that you're also taking care of yourself as much as possible.
So we're going to now coin mental health rocket based on Barbara's description of that. Thinking through now the whole COVID-19 saga, It's fair and fine for somebody who's a self-starter, who's motivated, who's got that jet fuel to kind of take off and figure things out as they go along. But not everybody is wired to deal with the enormity of being distanced from home, of getting pressure to remit money back home, of, I don't know, of just kind of coping with the fear factor that people are dropping left, right, and center. And one little mistake could cost you your life. Tari, you're my name right now because I know that this is a subject matter that's really close to your heart, and you've been doing a lot of stuff online helping youth through mental health concerns. Why did you choose to occupy this space, and what have you seen to kind of motivate that action?
So for me personally, it was in 2017 when unfortunately my brother passed away. And he struggled with depression, and he never told us, and we actually found out from his friends. And the reason behind it is because with things like mental health, being a man, you know, people think you have to be strong, you can't be weak, you can't express your emotions. And so myself and a couple of friends decided to take it upon ourselves to break the stigma, specifically in Zimbabwe, where mental health is so apparent. You know, you look at the World Health Organization, which says Zimbabwe is ranked number 19 in terms of suicide deaths a year, which is, you know, absolutely insane. And so we decided to create this platform where people can share their experiences and their coping mechanisms when it comes to mental health. So we get these 13-year-olds, 35-year-olds sharing their different experiences in light of, let's say, the, you know, lockdown situation. And I myself, someone else can look and say, oh, wow, you know, Tinashe said this. I'm struggling with that exact same thing. Maybe I can do it to better my own mental health. But then alongside that, obviously people are like, well, Tari, you're not a professional. There's no way you can, you know, be of any, you know, substance. And hence why we partnered with the Zimbabwe Psychological Association, who monitor our page, and they also provide us with a 24-hour hotline for people who want a message call. But we understand that this is only limited to people who have access to data, and people were saying data is expensive in Zimbabwe. So we're looking at different ways to send broadcast messages through the different networks like Telecel and Econet to really show people that your mental health really helps you, as Ms. B was saying, to find your why. And from finding your why, you can see and bring out the skill to pursue that why, to pursue that cause.
Okay, and then perhaps Diana, leveraging your medical experience, how effectively do you think that communication is reaching people who can actually make a difference? So great, I'm absolutely delighted that you've got this partnership going. Between the partnership and youth, you've kind of solved an equation. But then there's this broader equation of parents and elders and the broader society who needs to be able to facilitate that healing process and just kind of help work with youth that might be going through psychological challenges. From your medical background, talk us through how, well, it's actually not a medical question, but let me know your thoughts around how you bridge that gap.
Okay, so then mental health, the issue with mental health in Africa is that it's sort of a stigmatized disease. So if somebody says, perhaps I'm depressed, the first thing is people are going to say, don't be stressed, and then that's that. Or they're going to say it's a spiritual problem. And I guess that's kind of an issue, because if you've got diabetes, everybody's going to make sure you take your insulin shots as you go to church. Nobody's going to say, go to church, let's pray for your insulin. But when it comes to mental health, that's sort of where the major problem is. And then the other thing is, in Zimbabwe, we've got one psychiatrist for 1 million people. So that means we don't have enough psychological cover on the medical side. So every effort anybody does is genuinely essential at this point in time. And then how effective it is, it's actually very effective, because these toll-free numbers, I remember I had to talk to a colleague recently who was going through depression, because I just asked how they were. And then there was a toll-free number which was provided by the Friendship Bench, and they managed to get help there. So, and then there's also that concept of using grandmothers in the rural areas that the Friendship Bench started, and it's now into other countries, where you provide psychotherapy using the current community leaders who are already there, so that we bridge that gap in rural areas and things. So there's sort of a screening tool for depression that's given to grandmothers in rural areas, because they can then talk to people. People trust grandmothers in general. I love my grandma, guys. So I feel like it's for everybody. So then it's also what people are doing to bridge the gap. But this whole website thing that people are doing, it's great. Thank you so much for releasing the number as well. It's great what Tari and team are doing. And I feel like everybody has a part to play. And I guess it also comes to when your friends tell you that they're anxious or anything. This is to you young people. Please make sure you listen and you make them feel listened to, so that they find somebody to talk to, because most people feel unheard.
Wonderful. And Tari, let me know, back to you quickly, let me know what your ultimate objective is. For you to feel that you've succeeded in this phenomenal initiative that you started, what needs to happen?
I would like the whole population of Zimbabwe to be educated about mental health, those who suffer with it to be treated with that. So we're actually working on an application which provides people with specific geolocations to locate the specific psychologists in their areas, so that they can, not just get the suitable help with a psychologist, but they can build this support system within their locations. And this is not just in Zimbabwe, but, think about university students who go out to the diaspora having that culture shock. They need that Zim system, that Zim culture. And we're working on an application at the moment, bring this into reality. So my personal goal is for the whole of Zimbabwe to know that, mental health is so real for every single person. We're just on a spectrum, but we want to get towards the positive end of the spectrum.
Wonderful. You see, Zimbabwe, for those watching or who've just joined in, we have this phenomenal group of young people who are in various fields, leveraging technology. I know that this is about youth and COVID-19, but there are just so many variables to this debate, and I want to just explore all of them. So if I don't say COVID-19 every 5 seconds, please know that there is a causal link to what we are discussing. Back to you, Barbara, then. Having heard of this brilliant initiative, in your profession, how do you feel that we can mobilize people to find an interest in actually studying psychology, because it's not deemed one of the more glamorous medical fields? And, everybody wants to be a neurosurgeon. Everybody goes off to medical school. This is a bit of a plug for you, Diana. But most people go off and kind of choose the more glamorous medical specializations. What do you think Zimbabwe needs to do more of to kind of get more people involved in psychology and supporting people with mental health concerns?
The first thing is to understand who you are as a person, to find out what you're interested in and what brings the best out of you, or even the things that are not so great. What are those? Because that's how I got into psychology. It was more a self-healing path to say, these things in my life are not going great, because I suffered from depression to the point where I planned my suicide. Because no one was speaking to me. And so I went out and started reading and understanding, why am I feeling this way? And the depression that I had, and what most people sort of struggle with, is because we are told by society that as a Black woman, as a white man, as a Black boy, or whatever it is, this is how you're supposed to act. But actually your mind and your trajectory is leading you somewhere else. So there's a disconnect. And so you go into these spaces where you're thinking a lot, and yet there's no one to speak to, because our community has been so fragmented with migration and all the other things that have happened, whether it's high deaths from HIV and things like that. And so when you go on a journey for yourself to understand who you are truly, it becomes easier for you to have open conversations with other people, because you're understanding who you are. And that's where psychology comes in, where it's about the psyche. Who are you as a person, and how can you help the next person? I did a study with Island Hospice and Healthcare through a grant from King's College London, and we tested a grief and bereavement tool in Chitungwiza, which is community-based. And I like how Tari is talking about community. And because we've been so fragmented, we've lost that sense of community. We don't speak to our grandmothers, we don't speak to our parents, and vice versa as well. We just get on with life because life is hard. But we don't actually have those fireside chats where we actually sit and speak and share. And that's so important to making sure that we move forward as a community. And we've lost that. And in this time of COVID-19, we've been given an opportunity to come together around the fireside and just chat and understand where life has been and where we're going and how we want to move forward as a family. What are your family values? So in those discussions, we get to really understand what our psyche is all about, and we get to share what we're excited about, and we get to share the journeys and the instruments and the information that we can find online or in other spaces. And I love the diversity of the subjects that we're talking about on this platform as well, because it does show and share with everyone else who's watching that there are so many other professions that we can go into, especially now that we're moving into a different space. The professions that are so important at the moment are those who are centered around people and understanding people. And the way we can be better able to understand other people is by taking that journey to self-knowledge. Self-knowledge is the biggest thing that we can ever do moving forward. When you harness yourself and understand yourself more, you actually allow other people to do the same because you understand that journey a bit more.
I've just had Garikai Gombiro say fireside therapy. And fireside therapy, if my powers of deduction are anything close to sane, kind of links nicely to the expression that you used, which was burn. You said burn. What does burn mean? And how does it link to perhaps this idea of mental health, strain, just kind of feeling burnt out with all the stuff that youth are needing to contend with at the moment?
I think burnout, for me, why I started thinking about it in the first place is because I work at a startup here in Singapore. I'm one of the co-founders, and we don't have an office. We have a virtual office, which means nobody ever went in. I always worked from home. And so when everybody went into quarantine, I expected everything to be the same level of productivity, same level of enthusiasm and drive. It hasn't been. And so I've had to start reckoning with this idea of burnout, because we're not taking into enough account the mental strain of just the knowledge of what's going on around the world, even if it's not, perhaps affecting us as much as it is people in our family or friends or even strangers across the world. It's like a weight. It is a mental weight on a lot of people. And I think, at the same time you have these conversations going, I forgot who they referenced, but they said someone like, Einstein during the bubonic plague or something, please don't quote me, wrote his best piece of work. There was someone, and I saw it going around and they were like, this is your time to create the greatest thing you've ever created in your life. And it's astounding. And I think it's so difficult for people as well because of this weird, ceaseless time that we're in, that you find a lot of people wanting to be productive, but not resting enough. And when they're resting, they're feeling guilty about procrastinating. So it's not a full rest. It's maybe if I just check this and I check that. And it just continues in this loop. And the longer that we stay in quarantine, the longer that this happens, we need to start addressing it. And so I think that's where burnout comes from. It touches on a lot of these ideas that people have already brought up.
And when we had an offline discussion, there was a sense that insomnia has become a real issue amongst young folk, right? I've got Iwani raising her hand and saying yes right here. Tinashe, I will come back to you, Barbara. I know you want to say something. But Tinashe, just give me your 2P on the idea of burnout. Have you found it particularly stressful, learning remotely, being away from family, just that mental health and burnout scenario? What does it look like for you?
It's funny. I think anyone who knows me or really got to know me during when I was in high school would know I was into everything. I wanted to do anything and everything, and I would do it 110% every time. And then going into college after high school, it was funny. It was the complete opposite. I wanted to do what I wanted to do, and that only. And everything else around me, college activities, that was secondary, even probably tertiary. But it's been hard because in a culture where, or even in an environment, I have found, and I've been very blessed to be around people who have shown me a level of excellence and a level of achievement that has inculcated in my mind a framework where I can't be mediocre. I can't allow myself to become mediocre. And that's not necessarily I have to make the most money or I have to sell the most records. No, that just needs to be, I know in myself, I've gone above and beyond to better myself every day. But there's a point at which bettering yourself is taking a step back and saying, okay, I need to stop. I need to stop and I need to breathe and I need to rest. Because if my mind is not rested, it's not going to function the best way. And I think I've had conversations with Ms. B about this as well, about I constantly dog myself. I say dog myself. I constantly beat myself up when I'm not working hard. And that working hard point gets into my head very much because I say, oh, I haven't written a song this week. I need to write a song. I sit down to write the song, nothing comes out. And then I get upset, and it's a constant cycle of just upset and doubt. And instead of doing that, allow yourself to rest, allow yourself to take a step back from it. And like Iwani said, for instance, with, a lot of people making the best works of their life during points of turmoil. I think I look back during, the 90s and 80s in America, Black people were still under so much duress and discrimination and such racial oppression. This was a time of incredible music, absolutely incredible music. So you say to yourself during this time, wow, this is my time to speak out. This is my time to make my music. But no, like, you have to think about, everything else. Like, it's hard to walk outside and be safe, things like that. So it's kind of building in that idea to allow yourself to say, no, I'm going to use this time to recalibrate. I'm going to use this time to rest. And it's hard. I think it's hard for a lot of people to do that when you want to be great, or even when you want to do something. It's hard to stop. So I think that's my take on burnout.
Okay. So we're going to zoom in now to our wise one, Mr. Nigel. You've heard all these things the youth are talking about, right? So concerns about what the abnormal looks like and feels like for them. We've heard about mental health. We're hearing about burnout. There are quite a lot of themes that are floating around. What do you think that they should be focused on? What's the primary, okay, you've got all these things happening, but life must move on. What does that look and feel like?
I would highly recommend balance. You were asking for a single word. I would say reboot. So press the reboot button in your life and maintain balance. Tinashe was onto that. I think you need to exercise. You need to eat healthy. You need to get fresh air if you can. Get the sun if you can. It's not just about the hard work. Connect with people. No person is an island. Maintain a good circle of friends. There should be people in your inner circle. I think part of that mental health issue that the panel discussed is, we faking it to make it. And I watch the young people, I watch, my kids, and sometimes, people are just not being real. They're not being truthful. They're not within that network where they can get real with one another. So I think all that really matters. You got to engage with your society. Tonight was a classic example. You re-engage with your community back home. You're part of that community. You've got to contribute positively. If you're able to engage your society as you've been able to do, and I was taking copious notes as part of the Solidarity Trust, we want to know what you're thinking. We want to know what you are seeing and observing out yonder. And if you see systems, if you see cultural practices that could contribute to us changing our society and making it better, we want to hear from you. So connect. Don't stay isolated out there in Japan or wherever else you are. We want to know, and you've got a role to play in the betterment of Zimbabwe. If there are ideas, entrepreneurial ideas, artistic ideas, bring them home. And then, if there are opportunities yonder for people back home, the art, we can create and make an impact as Zimbabweans. So do make a dent. It's a new normal, is how I view the circumstances now. So let's explore, and you have the energy. What I love about youthfulness is your drive is a lot higher than some of the energies or lack thereof that I'm witnessing here. I love the energy. I love the drive that the youth bring. So I hope that those 2 cents, after listening very intently, are a contribution to the conversation.
Wonderful. So we've agreed that we're rejecting the phrase new normal because we don't want to normalize this, right?
Okay.
So we're going with this abnormal set of circumstances we're needing to cope with. Guys, as we start to kind of round up, I am not ignoring you, Barbara. I've still got you on my radar. But as we start to round up, I want you to think about what policymakers, should there be any watching this, what they could do to support the youth, to encourage your voices to be heard, to bring you to the table and join into dialogue that impacts you and generations to come after you. So as you're thinking, Barbara, you wanted to say something. What was it?
Yes, so wanting to speak a little bit about what Iwani was talking about around burnt out. I wrote an article a few days ago around what we can do to stop burnout from happening before it happens. And I was then reading another article that a friend wrote, and she said that sometimes we don't even realize that we're going into burnout because it's an abnormal situation, right? It's something that is new, so we don't realize that it's burnout. And so we beat ourselves down when we lack the energy to do the things that we've been doing in the past because of that. And the best thing to do is like what Nigel said, have a community around you. You know, those fireside chats, have a community around you of people you can speak to, people you know who will not be speaking negatively the entire time. So, you know, people who understand you. And that also goes into mental health, isn't it? It's about just having those real conversations, being real with the people around you. You know, if we're going to go back to the term rocket, it takes time to build a rocket. So even though you might want to launch and have all this fuel, it actually takes time to assemble it. So you need time to step back, relook at yourself, reassemble yourself, and then move forward with that. And that's self-care, right? That's self-love. And unfortunately, self-love and self-care has been misdefined by community and society as being selfish. But actually, you can never give another person what you don't have. So make sure you do take that time to build your rocket before you actually launch, because then you know where to go.
Wonderful. Okay, guys, so I said policy, just really quick bullet points on what, in fact, let's extend it. I said policymakers. Let's talk about grown-ups generally. I think that probably makes more sense. So grown-ups or policymakers, what should they be doing more of to hear your voices?
So from me, I'm thinking investment, but the investment has to be in a community where there's a mixture of people in the diaspora, people within a wide age gap, like having young people there and adults, because I believe, let's say the older generation has the wisdom, but as Mr. Chanakira was saying, we have the energy. So having those two together, but also bearing in mind, while maybe, you know, there are people in the diaspora, we still need those homegrown solutions and homegrown innovations. So having some form of committee, which is I guess, diaspora and Zimbabwean, mixture of ages, but also within different sectors, so that they can feed into those separate sectors and thus change the system.
And on the issue of investments, obviously, with all the stuff that you might be doing with technology that applies to both you and Iwani, you know, you have these great ideas, but banks aren't always open to loaning you money or, you know, to lending, to project financing, or wherever it might be. So you're absolutely right. It does take that community to come together and let's invest in each other and help each other grow economically and otherwise. So I picked up an equation from what you've said, Tari. Wisdom plus energy equals rocket.
I wanted to add to investment, to policymakers and adults. Please open up the market to young people and make it very easy for the young people who have ideas to actually implement them. So there was a study that we studied in the Harvard Business School recently about comparing North and South Korea and why they've got such different economies when you've got basically the same people, the same country divided into two. And it was shown that it's because the market is more inclusive in South Korea than in North Korea. So please make it easy for a young person who's starting his project, who's building things, sculptures and things. Make it easy for a person to come up with a proposal that's probably technological and doesn't have to go through 30 offices and has to know 50 people before the idea even gets to a guy who then says, no, we can't implement it. Because then you're frustrating young Zimbabweans and who end up leaving, going to countries where you just go to a person and they say it's fine, and then you then cry that you have a brain drainage. Sorry for sounding mean.
No, I absolutely agree with you. Could not agree with you. See, this is why I love talking to you guys. Tinashe, give me your TP.
The best thing that policymakers and adults can do is not to just give responsibility to the youth, but to make the youth want to be responsible. You know, create that desire for responsibility, and also an awareness that the only way Zimbabwe will move is if we move with it, and how much we decide to give in and push with Zimbabwe, especially the youth. That's how far Zimbabwe will go. And I think it's going to be the policymakers, the way they can do that is making us proud of our home, making us understand our history. I think there's such a lack of understanding of the Zimbabwean history, and even just within families, you know, understanding of family history. I know knowing my history, my family history, has made me fall in love with Zimbabwe to a point. It's an unconditional love. You know, it's an unconditional love that I have for the country, just because I know how deeply rooted my life is within it and how much it's given me. So, but that's not the same for a lot of my peers. If policymakers and parents can do that more, that's when you'll start to see more people coming back.
Sure.
You know, so yeah, that's
fragmentation.
One thing.
Sure, thank you so much, Tinashe. The fragmentation of families obviously being that thing that takes away from oral tradition and some of the customs that helped us understand where we come from and where we should be going to. Iwani, last but not least.
I would say to adults and policymakers, allow yourselves to be proven wrong and don't take it personally. Because I think that a lot of the time when people come up with new suggestions, people tend to sometimes feel personally threatened that, you know, I put this in place, I know what's best, are you telling me that I am wrong? And that's not the case. It's just that times have changed. And someone may be able to help you improve upon your idea. It's not necessarily undermining. And so I think, yeah, allow yourselves to be proven wrong.
And my goodness, this has been so insightful. You guys are absolutely brilliant. And it's been great talking to you. You've brought a diversity to this conversation that I hadn't budgeted for coming in. It's been really, really insightful. I'm sure people who've tuned in, I've seen loads of comments flying around, endorsements coming through for all that you've said. I can only wish the absolute best for you. I shall be watching your futures very closely and keenly if you'll give me eyes into your lives, because I can just see a super bright future ahead. I'm needing to hand over now to SOTZIM. I want to say thank you to everybody who's tuned in. Please do stay on because we've got some important messages that we need to relay to you. But in the meanwhile, I'm hopeful that our panelists will answer questions that you've put on the online platforms after the event. Keep tuned, keep commenting. Let's get this dialogue going. We want to hear your voice. Your voice is an important part of progress. So you absolutely have a legitimate place at the table. And I personally welcome you to it. Karen, over to you.
Solidarity Trust Zimbabwe is an organization formed by Zimbabweans for their country as a response to COVID-19 in collaboration with government, private, and civic sectors. The non-profit trust SOTZIM exists to complement and support the efforts of our government, represented by the Ministry of Health and Childcare, as well as the National Interministerial Task Force on COVID-19. SOTZIM fundraises and channels funds to designated COVID-19 response centers around the country. It has established a telemedicine call center, which you can reach by dialing 2019. It is manned by doctors, nurses, and other qualified personnel on a 24-hour basis. Beyond COVID-19, SOTZIM plans to continue to support the public health care sector by raising funds to upgrade and equip our hospitals and clinics in order to ensure that all Zimbabweans have access to quality health care. SOTZIM prides itself in the manner in which it is managed, adopting best practices and standards with the assistance of some of the country's leading audit, financial advisory, and legal firms. It has a broad base of professionals to call upon for additional expertise and assistance. We work for the benefit of all Zimbabweans. Solidarity Trust Zimbabwe, helping to make a difference. To donate and assist, please go to our website at sotzim.org. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much. What an amazing panel. Thank you all. I so appreciate it. Iwani, I'm sure it's way past. I'm sure you're already thinking you're burning out because you've got to go to school tomorrow. Not school. You got to go do your thing with your startup. Wonderful, wonderful. My son, I miss you even more seeing you out there. Amazing. Thank you, Barbara. Thank you to all the panelists. Just amazing insights, and for sure, I've taken a lot of nuggets from all of you, and especially for us grown-ups to admit when we are not getting it right. We need your advice. Remember that. It's really, really important. We want your advice. We want you to tell us what we're doing wrong. I like to employ people who tell me what to do, because if I didn't employ people who did that, it would make my job so much harder. So thank you all so much for all of those insights. It's really, really appreciated. So I wanted to just talk again to say that we've had a spike. We've had a spike of cases. It's almost 4 times. I think we're at about 100 and Nigel, correct me, 100 and is it 170 cases or 150 cases, something like that?
Yeah,
which has really been crazy. There were 76 cases yesterday, and we don't want to panic. I don't think there's need to panic per se, because nobody is yet in a position where they're going into hospital, but there's a lot of fear simply because a lot of the cases have been from people who have come in from quarantine. I mean, from outside, where they've been deported from various countries within the region. They've come in, and I think the populace and the population needs to understand that when people have come in from out of the country and we don't know where they've been and what they've been exposed to, we've got to educate each other. If you've got a family member, if you know somebody who's come in and they're not in quarantine, don't provide shelter for them and expose them to your family, because that will just create more spread. And that's really tough. So if you've got people who are coming in, here on the screen, we've got the ZINCAT, which is another fantastic group that are providing isolation and quarantine for people who are coming back to Zimbabwe. It will be on our website. It's on their website as well, www.zincat.org, which will let you know what to do. But for even those who have gone into government facilities, please, people, let us protect one another. Let's try to stop the spread. And we can only do that by becoming more than ever more diligent, more disciplined, to make sure that we are, it's not called social distancing, it's called physical distancing. That's the new term, physical distancing. It's called washing your hands as much as you possibly can, not touching your face, wearing the masks. We've done such a fantastic job in Zimbabwe of keeping the numbers low, of not having the spread. Can we continue, please, to make sure that we do that? It's really, really important. I wanted to also say that with the hospital opening, the hospital that we've been involved in, St. Anne's, opening very soon, if we don't get the continued support from everybody around the world, we'll open the hospital and then it won't be able to run. It needs finances in order to be able to run, to operate, to pay the doctors' salaries, to be able to pay the overheads. We need the support. We need all of the people who are watching, even our panelists. Please put the word out there that every dollar that is donated will go towards a health worker, a frontline worker. So it's a concerted effort that's required, where we can really, really try to make sure that the spread is contained, and people who are coming in stay in quarantine, that they're disciplined and they don't just go out there and infect other people. Today, I had one of the ladies who works with me here at home, my bride, who was like, I need to go home. And I said to her, you can go, but you have to come back, because I don't know where you are going to, when you go and see your family, that you don't know where your son has gone and who he's interacted with, and she has an underlying condition of high blood pressure, and I don't want her to be exposed to that and then come back and then also expose everybody else. So we've got to try to be disciplined. We've got to try to be very, very proactive. In prevention is better than cure, people. Please remember that prevention is better than cure. So help us to educate everybody that you know, to the people who live Kumusha, your grandparents, dial 2019 if you're not sure of what to do. If you've got any symptoms, please do that. If you've come into the country and you're afraid because you think you might be positive, or you've got nowhere to go and you don't want to go to the awful quarantine places that are available, dial 2019 and say, where can I go to? I really am struggling, or I'm hiding. I'm in hiding because I don't want to go to that quarantine place. Dial 2019 and let's try and find a place for you that's going to protect you and the thousands and thousands of people around us in our country. So that's my plea to everybody today, to just make sure that we remain vigilant and disciplined, to not continue and to have a spike in the cases that are prevalent at the moment, and to also just really make a plea to continue to donate. We are getting so many donations. Stanbic are doing an incredible donation tomorrow of PPE for frontline workers and health workers, which is fantastic. We've had all of these fantastic corporates. Siemens have done a contribution. We need just the $10 or $5 or $2 from all the people around the world, from all the people in Zimbabwe, to contribute so that we can save lives in Zimbabwe. We can save our fellow Zimbabweans. That's my pledge and my plea to everybody. Mucha, just an amazing moderator. Don't you all agree? Wasn't she just awesome? And she's so beautiful. And Nigel, you look so young. And it's been fantastic. And I really think that this conversation with the youth must continue. And like I said, in due course, we will have everybody come back and we can have a big, kind of reunion of all the different people who have come onto the program, which will just be fabulous for us to be able to do that. One of the good news stories today is that we had our first COVID-19 patient tested positive, pregnant person who had a safe delivery of a baby, and both mother and child are all both safe. So we want to thank God for that, and we want to thank the health professionals for that we did have that first COVID-19 positive patient who was pregnant and had a safe delivery of her baby today. So very, very happy about that. And thank you to all the doctors again once more, and everybody else. Thank you so much, Garai, who's in the background, who hosts us. He's just an amazing guy, and we really are thankful to him. And thank you to all of you who are out there. Tinashe for waking up early, Iwana for staying up late. And, in Mutare, our doctor in Mutare, who has managed to be there. Thank you so much for being on the program. Barbara, you're the most amazing life coach. I recommend Barbara to all the young people, old and young, to tell you the truth. I do recommend Barbara if you're looking for direction and how you want to just go about in your life and what you want to do with your life. She is just phenomenal. So I do recommend people to, if you want to get hold of anybody, inbox me. I am open. I give my number to everybody. You can find me on Facebook. You can inbox me or Tinashe, and he will share his mum with you. So thank you all very much, and have a fabulous rest of your week. Thank you so much. I'll hand back to you, Mucha.
Sure. I want to say thank you to Zimbabwe and the world for joining us today, tonight, this morning, wherever you are in the world, to make your mark with SOTZIM. We have had a very, very interesting conversation with young, bright minds dotted across the planet who have been challenged to start reverse mentoring. So guys, you've been challenged to talk to grown-ups more. And I use that phrase grown-ups quite loosely, but engage, talk, make your voices heard. And to us grown-ups, we need to listen and we need to act on that. Thank you. Good night. See you again this time next week on SOTZIM.
Yay, thank you.
Good night.
Thank you.
Yay!
Thank you from those who are alive today, because your contributions help them. Thank you from the child who did not lose a parent because you gave. Thank you from the person who is on their way to the hospital right now, knowing that they will get the best possible medical assistance. Thank you from the frontline staff who now have protective personal equipment. They know that they and their families are safe because of you. Thank you from the person who does not even know yet that they need you. Solidarity Trust Zimbabwe would like to thank every single person, every organization, and every business that has helped donate and assist in the ongoing fight against COVID-19. Please keep giving, keep supporting. Make sure you visit our website, www.sotzim.org. Donate and join the fight against COVID.